Okay, in the third installment of our facial rigging, we're going to start working on a little bit of Dorito effect. So this is the effect that happens that when a character is being animated and morphed, as we have here. So we have our control objects morphing the face. I'll just go and hide some of those controls. So those are the control objects here. You can see that we have our face being morphed, and we have all of these control objects down the body controlling the bones inside of it. And now what we want to have is effect where we have little controls stuck on the surface that move with the morphing and move with the skinning, and also allow us to be able to skin to them and pull on them. Now this normally would create a circular dependency. You really can't have it stuck to the surface and deforming the surface that it's on. So we have to find a way around that. I'm going to first just take all of these and just move them into a new layer so that we've got a layer just for our control objects. And let's just call that controls for now. And I'm going to hide off, make sure all our targets are hidden. And we may as well hide off the bones for now. It looks like we've got one more control object for the jaw. And I'll just move that down so that we can see all those. So first we're going to need a copy of our main animated head here, the one that has the skin and morpher on it. So I'm going to go Control V, just use it as a copy. And I'm going to call this Dorito. And we'll make it really clear, we'll make it red. So our Dorito character basically is a red, has a red wireframe to it. So now we have two. We have the Dorito. That we can see here, and we have the head retopo. So our Dorito head's in blue. And now we're just going to hide it off for the moment. We're going to start building some controls. So I want to do this completely manually first without my tools, and then you'll see how much faster it can be if you write some MaxScript tools. Now again, most of my MaxScript tools that I use for this are not available. So we are going to use a point helper, and I'm just going to go and create a point somewhere over here and just give it a center box, and we'll give it a size of say about a 2. And we want to attach that to the surface of this model. So animation, and we want to find constraints, an attachment constraint, pick the surface. It'll open up the motion panel, and in that motion panel you see that it's added a list controller, and the second controller in there is an attachment constraint. We can say set position and set it to wherever we want. So I'm going to go and place it over on the corner of the mouth, so you can see you can move it around. It'll tend to jump on you and move around on you, but that's fine. So here's our point placed on the surface, and I'm going to want to rotate that a little bit. So I always like to have my Y up, for instance, on those objects. And so that the animator's always dealing with an XY along the surface and a Z sticking out from it. So we'll say about there. Now we need a little control object. We're just going to do that with the circle. And that circle is going to get aligned up to our point helper. And I'll change the size of it down. Maybe make it a bit smaller. And let's move it straight out. But in this case, I want to move it straight out, and I want to leave its pivot point at that point there. So we can use an X-form modifier, or we could collapse it down to... And I'll just move it out along the X-form, or we could collapse it down to an editable spline and move the spline part of it if we wanted. Using the X-form can be easy, and I'll just collapse that down. So it's going to be an editable spline anyway. So we could easily have gone into the spline and just moved it as opposed to moving the node. This is just going to make it a little easier to grab. So now that it's on the corner of the mouth, we're going to have to link it, the control object, up to our point helper so that it moves with it. Oops, let's make sure that it's linked to the point helper. And we should be able to scrub now, and you can see that little point helper is now moving with the head, and it's also going to move with the target. So if I were to grab one of the controls and move it, you can see that little control is now stuck to the surface. Now, being stuck to the surface, I can't go and skin the mouth to this control because we'd have a circular dependency. The head, basically controls the control controls the head, so we can't do that. So we're going to cheat that out with this Dorito. Now I'm just going to hide off the actual head and unhide the Dorito now, and then we're going to work on it. So we're going to need a couple more point helpers. These ones aren't going to have any attachment constraints on them, so I'm just going to make one real quick. Create helper point. I'll drop that in there. I'll give this a size of 3, and I'll give it how about a different color, maybe a blue. And I'm going to line it up to the point helper that we have stuck on the surface, position and orientation. This one now does not move with the head, and it's going to need a second one again. So I'm just going to say Control V, copy it, and I'm going to make it a size of 4. So we've got one a little bit larger, and I'll make this a green color. So we have the point helper, the small one here. It's stuck on the surface of the animation head. We have the control object that is linked up to it. I'm just going to make this maybe right now as well. I tend to make this a port starboard, so this is going to be green as well. So this is my control object. And it's the thing that the animator is going to be able to grab and move to pull the corner of the mouth around. We have our 2 new point helpers here that are just floating in space right now, a blue one and a green one. So we want to link our new green one. I'm going to do this in wireframe. I want to link the green one to the blue one. So the blue one is the parent of it, and you can see that now we can move that. Reason for this is that we want this object here, this new green one on the outside, we want it to move in what people think of as a local space. In other words, when I tell it to move along Z, I want it to move along that Z, and not, for instance, this Z. Problem is objects don't move in a local space. They move in their parent space. So if an object doesn't have a parent, and the parent is world in Max, that would be straight up and down, because this is the way its parent is currently situated. So in this case, we've now given this green box, this green point helper, a parent object that is nicely aligned to the direction we want it to go in. So they have this natural direction where Z is going to be out. For that fact, our control object is set up exactly the same way. Its Z is out, its Y is up, and its parent is that axis, and that's the axis that's actually moving along. So I'm going to take the control here on the corner of the mouth, this new point helper on the corner of the mouth, and we're going to wire it up. So I'm going to go Alt-5, and I'm going to load it up on the right-hand side and just find the transforms for it. But let's freeze transform on that, and we'll open that up and get the zeroed out position. I'm going to grab my control object, freeze transform on it, and load that up on the other side, and basically have the 0 position XYZ control the 0 position XYZ of the point helper, and say connect. So you can see now when I grab this point, or this control, and move it out, the point moves with it. Moves with it in all axes. If I scrub the animation, you can see that these point helpers are being left behind. The animation head is being deformed, as you would expect. Oh, we didn't delete the modifiers off our Dorito, so made that mistake. I'm going to delete all the modifiers off the Dorito, so it doesn't move. There we go. So now you'll see that the control object that we have here is moving with the retopo. So it's moving with the retopo that's being deformed by the skin and morpher. And it's leaving the other ones, the little point helpers, behind. But if I grab that control that's still selected back here and move it along its local Z, you can see that the green point helper is also moving along its local Z. So it doesn't matter where it is. So if I pull it all the way out to here and move it, you'll see that this point helper down here is moving straight out because both of them are moving along their local axes. Do not use position constraints for this task because position constraints work in world space. We want that local space of a parameter wire to be controlling this. So you can see it's pulling straight out. We'll be able to take this head now and add a skin modifier to it. And with the skin modifier, we're going to want to use this green point helper as a bone. And we can do that in a couple of ways. One, I'm just going to go in and grab the area. First off, I'm going to I'll just do it by the right-click select. We'll say add bones, and that should be it there, 0.9. I should name them probably. And now we've got a head most likely completely skinned up to that point because we had wait all verts turned on. I'm just going to turn that off. And we have an absolute relative button. I'm going to turn on relative so it just grabs that area and it doesn't wait to anything else. We'll find now if I go and grab the point and move it, you'll see that's just the corner of the mouth now is actually working with that envelope. So you can see it's moving in that local space. With the Vincent head retopo, we're going to want to add to the morpher our Dorito head. So I'm going to do that right down at the very, very bottom here. I had one here as a test earlier. I'm just going to delete that channel. So I'm just going to say pick from scene, and we'll go and pick that new Dorito head and crank its value up to 100% so that it's always loading it at 100%. Now the other thing we want to do with the morpher is make sure that we have automatically reload targets on. Now automatically reload targets can be a bit of a problem when we're loading all of these other targets in the scene. It'll get very slow if we've got 99 other targets being loaded, and the 100th one is down at the bottom. It's really the only one. So what it comes down to is the final model can have all of the targets deleted out of the scene anyways. So all of these animation targets won't be in the scene to reload it, and it won't be looking for them. So with the automatically reload on, we can grab this control object, and you can see now it's actually morphing that head. So its control object is pulling on the green point. The green point is a bone in the Dorito, and the Dorito is being loaded back in a morph. So now we've got the nice ability to, I'm just going to hide off the Dorito. As the control moves with the corner of the mouth, you can see those points are being left behind. But if I grab that control now, it looks like it's actually weighting it and pulling the corner of the mouth. So this has managed to get around the problem of having a circular dependency as it's reloading all the time. So now we can tack control objects around the mouth and have them work very nicely in a sort of Dorito effect where the controls stick to the surface. So what I've done is I've gone back and I'm going to reset this up for us with a little bit more of a complicated setup. I've added all the controls around the mouth that I want. Now to get them mirrored and whatnot, I've used some of my custom tools that I use to be able to add one on one side and it flips it over on the other side and attaches everything just to make my life easy. I'm just going to hide off the head so we can see what's going on. So now I have the control object that's round here, and I have the parent, and then I have the two point helpers that we did in the example previous, and these ones are floating behind. So you can see when I scrub the animation, you can see the mouth controls are moving up, and they're actually moving and morphing. You can see the mouth is opening, and if we show that happening here, you can see that they're staying on the surface. and the other ones are staying behind with the head that's going to be handling the Dorito effect and the skinning. So there's a a nice simple setup. I'm just going to turn that off. Now what we need to do is do the next stage, and that's all the parameter wiring. So we need to be able to parameter wire the large point helper that's staying behind to the circle control object. Well, this can be a slow process, so a little bit of scripting is the easiest way to do something like this. To do this, we're going to work with a new script, and I'll just pull that in from the other side, and we're going to go in and write that. Now, parameter wiring is really easy for setting this up. All we need to know is the path to the controllers that we want to connect. So I'm going to use the dope sheet for this. And we can see that if I grab the dope sheet here, we have a path that is the control object, transform, position, 0 position, XYZ. So it's going to look like this. Paramwire dot connect. So that's telling Max that we want to connect up a parameter wire. Now let's make this a little wider, maybe a little smaller. We'll do it on one line. And we need to know what the controlling track of animation is going to be. And we're going to use a real quick way to get to that. I'm going to use $. I would never ever use this in a script of any value. This is just for a quickie, but we're going to have two objects picked. We're going to have the first object picked, which is going to be the control, and the second object picked, which is going to be the bone that's going to be deforming. So we're going to call this master and slaves. So we list the master first, and then we can list the tracks by name, and you do that with square brackets and then prefixing it with the number sign and type transform. So we can see that the control object has the control. This is our $1, our first one picked, and then we have transform, position, 0 position, XYZ. So we have transform, position, and then 0 underscore pause XYZ. Now you'll notice that I went through in the underscores. If there are spaces in the name, you need to use underscores instead because it doesn't want to see those in name parameters. So there's our first one. So that's going to be the master. As it turns out, our slave is going to look exactly the same, but it's going to be the second one that's selected. And it's going to be the exact same track because it's going to just follow down the exact same path, and we froze transforms on it exactly the same way. So that's going to be the master, that's going to be the slave. And then we need to give it the equation that gets put in. So when we look at a param wire, there's the expression down here that gets typed in. And that expression starts with the name of the controlling track, and it's going to be inside of quotes. So we could put math in here. We could say times 2 if we wanted. In this case, we don't want to do that, however. And so we have a very simple little line here that should control it up. Let's find out if that works. I'm just going to say Shift-Enter. And if I grab my listener and pull this over, I can run this one line by putting my cursor anywhere on it and saying Shift-Enter, and it said true. We should be able to grab the control now and notice that the point helper is moving. So let's get that into a nice quick little button for ourselves to work with. I have a set of tools here that I often just, it's a little toolbar that I've generated. Let's see if we can get that to float on this side. And this is where I just stick quick macros that I need as I'm working. So it's just been created with the custom user interface. And I've used toolbars and just made a new toolbar called pen, and so I can just dock it there and drop stuff in. Now I've got one up here already, but I want to grab this line of code and I'm going to drag in a second one, and you can see that it just gives a little icon there. You can right click on it and say edit button appearance if you want, and go in and take and call it something that we'll call it wire pause, and I'll say OK. So that's going to wire up the position. Now something else we might want to do is also wire up the rotation of it, which we didn't do before, so the animator can grab it and rotate it. Once again, really easy. We're just going to change these to rotation on both of those, And then we need to change what the end track looks like. So if we look at the rotations on these, it's 0 Euler XYZ. So this should be 0 Euler XYZ. And of course, Euler is the name of the mathematician who developed the math for it. So this one should also work. And I don't think I have both picked anymore. So let's have 1, 2 picked, and let's check that. Type to quaternion. Oh, and it looks like I broke my... I'm just going to freeze transform on those again. I broke it probably because of... no, it doesn't seem to want to do it. Oh, of course, I've got the wrong expression in here. So I'm going to make sure the expression's right. Freeze transform on those again. And I should be able to do them both one at a time. Now, instead of having 2 buttons, wire position and wire rotation, I could grab them both and drag them in. And I'll just call this, W pos rot for wire position rotation. So I should easily be able to grab any 2 now, 1, 2, and wire them both together to make my life really easy. So learning a little bit of scripting, especially when you're doing rigging processes like this, can be very, very necessary for speeding up your workflows and making sure that you aren't wasting time doing something that could be done much quicker. Now, we could even make this quicker by throwing these inside of a for loop and looping through them, or even having a tool completely built that sets all of this up for us from scratch, so we never have to do any of it other than hit a button, and it creates all the point helpers and hooks everything up for us. So I'm just going to finish this off, and then we'll be back to skin it up. So on to the next step, we're going to skin these control objects in and then start working with them. So I've done one extra thing. I've added another point helper to the center of the head and added it as a bone, as well as adding all of the points around the mouth that we have wired up as bones as well. So you can see that I've got one here, and then these ones that are just sort of tucked in around the mouth. The reason being is I find it easier to try and paint up all these weights. Right now we've got things like the top lip affecting the bottom lip. We've got all kinds of weird oddities in the skinning. So I find it much easier just to add one big point in there, turn on the select vertices, grab all of our verts in our model, and we're just going to weight them up to 100% using the bone tools. So I'm just going to grab that. I'm just going to say weight to 100. Then I'm going to do, first thing I always do next, because I've put all the weight into this one bone, we want to remove 0 weights, basically meaning that any of these other envelopes, they used to have control over an area or some verts. And those verts are still in its bone list. So when we started blending and working with blending weights, we could end up blending in and out of to all kinds of different bones and not know it because they look like they have 0 weights. But because they're still part of the bones list, okay, they're going to end up getting weight applied to them when we start blending. So I'm going to work with these. I should have a mirror already set up. So if I were to check these, I should be able to see that I've got green and blue envelopes coming up, red ones in the middle. You can see the envelopes showing up there. But I should probably be able to turn down the size of these size of the mirroring and still keep a mirror mesh with a pretty low value. So you want to have that mirror threshold as low as possible. So this means I should be able to work on just one side and have that work for us. Now I'm going to go in and do some animation first. First off, I'm going to kill all the animation that we currently have in the scene so that those don't do anything. And I'm just going to get rid of all the it looks like we've got some on the jaw as well, so I'll get rid of that. I'm going to slide it along to frame 10, turn on animate, and then just start grabbing some of these control objects and pulling on them. And we'll just start with these corner ones, let's say. And we'll start pulling these open and moving them in the direction just around a local, for instance. So back to our Dorito head and our skin. and we'll start just painting in some weight. So I can scrub back and forward and see that it's going to be pulling in from this corner here. So we're going to use those weighted values down here. We're going to use the weight table, the paint weights, and we're going to paint those in. Again, what I've done to make this a lot easier, I'm using my skin tools that allow me to get access to some simple weighting tools. I want to use a low weight, big brush, and I want to start pulling that area. Now again, I want a pretty big brush. I want it to be nice and soft, just like we did when we used our morph targets. I don't want it to be pulling on anything that shouldn't be. So let's just start weighting that in. You're going to see that control object now moving as it's getting pulled in there. And it's kind of doing a double transform. And this is something we're going to have to fix next. Oops, I think I just painted right through to the other side of the mouth. And so there's a nice area of effect going on, but you're going to see there's a control object, and it's hard to see there. But you can see that it's actually moving twice as fast as it should be. Once again, this is a problem with the Dorito effect, that because the control is pulling on a bone, the bone's changing the shape of the Dorito target. That target's being loaded back in to the morpher. The morpher is then moving the control object because it's stuck to the surface. So we've got a double transform. Well, that can be resolved really, really quickly with our controls. So we can do that in Dope Sheet, or we could go over to the transforms here. And what we want to do is we want to take each of these tracks and we want to just simply stop their value from getting affecting the final output of the object. That's by setting its weight to 0. So we can say 0 weight. I don't have animate on. We don't want it to animate. And we could do that for the rotation as well. So in zeroing those out, you can see now it doesn't do that. It moves right on it. But moving it still actually moves and does what it's supposed to. It's just that it's not getting double input anymore because the user direct input isn't actually being used as an end value. The value's still there. It still registers it as a value. The animator can still work with the curves. For instance, you can see the controls here. I'll just go in and even delete just those keys on the position, for instance, so you can see the value change happen as we move it. That controller down here is going to get a value change even though we've zeroed out its weight, and that track isn't getting a weight anymore. Let's put the animation back in so we see it. And we're going to want to do that with all of the others. The way we're going to do this really fast and easy is a little bit of script here. So for X and selection do, so this is a for loop. It's going to loop through all of the currently selected objects. I'll start with these 3, for instance. And we need to get down to its controller and be able to set those controllers to a value of 0. So we need to be able to figure out what track that is. And so let's just do it, for instance, let's just do it with 1 right now and just find that value. I'm going to use a simple command called get, we'll do it sub anim names, and I'm going to pass that object in. And you'll see that it returns a long list of names to us down here at the bottom. So we want the transform next, and we're going to get down to these and figure out where we need to turn off, essentially. So again, let's just put that on, get subanim names. I'm going to run that again now on the transform, and we'll see that we can find position. And if we find position, we can find the weights. And under weights, we can see that there's a weight 0 position. And that's the end of the line. So this should have a value to it. So if I use this one line here, and I'll just put it down in the next line so we can see it, dot value, and ask for the value of it, you can see that it's got a value of 0 because that's the one that we zeroed out. Grab another one of these control objects and check it as a value of 100. So let's use this in our expression and say value equals 0. So we'll zero that one out, which means we can probably also do the next thing quite easy and do rotation. And this is going to be the Euler, 0 Euler, and we're going to type this in now. One of the problems here is if we just check this line, should actually probably isn't a problem. Sorry, I should just put it on the next line. Just make sure that the value is correct. Weights, yes, it is. Never mind. So that should work perfectly. We should be able to loop through all of these. So if I take this for loop and just take one object and run it. So let's grab all of these controls around the mouth. And they're going to be all the shapes. Probably easiest if we... So let's grab all these shapes. Looks like it's probably all these control objects in the list. Still need to name them correctly. And we can run this function on it. Again, we're probably going to need this more often. So I'm going to take this, drop it on our toolbar just to make a quick macro out of it. And say unweight. So we're going to copy and paste this, but we've got these dollar signs in here. These need to replace with X. So for X in selection do, X now represents each object. We're going to drop that in. We'll just say unweight, and we should be able to select them all, and now we don't get the double transforms happening. So let's get back to doing some weighting. So the corner of the mouth, I'll just animate that going back out again. I'll just pull that out. We can see two other controls here. We can pull those out. You can see right now it doesn't look like anything's moving. And this is going to be the weird one to get used to. As we first do it, the reason it's not moving, the point helper is moving, but the control isn't, is because we've told the control not to have any effect on itself from user input at this point. But once it's stuck to the surface and the weighting's set up, it'll actually start to work. So let's grab, we've got the corner of the mouth going up here. Let's grab this part of the face and start working on it. Now, again, I'm going to use my tools here just to weight in some weight, and you'll notice that I'm now weighting on areas that I don't want down below. So let's do this a different way. I'm just going to grab that, and I'm going to use my vertices, select vertices, and I'm going to grab a bunch of vertices in this area and just make sure that I don't have anything picked elsewhere in the head. So I've picked those points there. I could give them a specific weight to this one envelope now if I want. So I could say, let's make it 1. And let's grow it out from there. And I'll give it a little bit of weight. So it's just got a slight touch of weight to it. And then you can blend those in, and you'll see that it starts to have an effect. Now we probably want to pick some more in there and pick a larger area of verts above it. So I'm just going to do that manually. I'm just going to grab some verts, and then just again make sure that I don't have anything picked that I don't want on the back side of the head or inside the head that I not looking to have picked. Now I want the inside of the mouth most likely, but I don't want anything else. So I'm going to grab all those, and again a little bit of weight, and we're just going to blend and just blend that in. So you're going to see that it starts to get pulled up, and we can start seeing it getting pulled up out of the way. Now we can use our paint blend weights and our paint weights and start working on the area a bit more and just pulling that area up and letting it have an effect like you'd expect it to have. And this can take quite a while to start getting these weights really working the way you want and doing what you want. I'm going to go and skip over to the blend weights and just blend some of that in now. And we can see that starting to be lifted and pulled up out of the way. So let's do the bottom. Exactly the same way. I'll go and grab that envelope down here. And again, we could probably just turn off because we're not using the envelopes anymore. I'm just going to say show no envelopes. And now we'll pull the bottom lip down and start pulling it in. So we could either go with a selected area again. It's probably the easiest way to do this. I'm just going to grab a bunch of verts, maybe a bit more this time, maybe a whole row down that way. And again, I'm just going to make sure that I don't have anything selected that I don't want to have. And I'm going to grow that up. A little bit of weight. Forgot to make it, give it the weight to begin with, so I'm going to give that a 1. So it's really large. Then grow the weight up, a little bit of weight, and just hit blend a whole lot so it blends it in. And then I can go to doing a little bit of paint weighting to give myself the kind of fall offs that I'm looking for in more of a specific way. And we should start getting a decent pull on the corner of the mouth. You can see it's still quite a harsh line that's happening here. So I'm going to go in and just blend this some more probably. Oh, you'll notice with my paint weights tool just happening there that sometimes you have to pick it twice. You know, I wrote it a long time ago. Frankly, I would have to go back and take a look at it as to what's wrong there. So you can see that those weights there, I might want to push them into the red. So I'm going to use the scale weights and just scale it up. And that scales things based on their existing weights and allows you to scale up those weights instead of just adding to it. So I could say select affected, and I could say scale the weights and pull it up, sort of all of them up on a curve. And so now you can see you can start getting that corner of the mouth going and working with the corner of the mouth. I'm just going to get a sub-object for a moment and just play with that and just see what kind of solution I'm getting for those controls. So you can see I'm getting quite a fall off here. You can see the other controls are now moving with it. This control is not going to do anything at this point because this control here currently doesn't have any weighting on it. Neither will this one. And you can see where the point's sort of moving, but it's not. And it feels a little odd at first. But all we need to do is just keep animating them, stepping in, grabbing our point, grabbing some verts in the area. We could even just do it manually here and grab a bunch of verts. We didn't want to accidentally pick all the way through or something, and we wouldn't be getting necessarily everything we want on the other side. So I kind of like just grabbing an area, deselecting again, making sure I'm not picking through, giving it a weight of 1, growing it up. Doesn't look like it's a very good amount that's being picked down here, so I'm just going to add some more verts down below. And again, let's just deselect anything down the back of the head, and I'll give it a little bit of weight and blend it, and we should be able to get some more weighting happening there. So again, let's just go about blending in some weights. You can see I'm accidentally picking weights inside here. I'm just going to unweight them with holding down Alt to get rid of them if I've done it by mistake. Now I know I can do it there, unpaint, because that will be the only other bone, that main one that's got these center ones. Normally you want to try and avoid unweighting and unpainting weights to things. Or else you'll end up with problems because you don't know where those weights are being sent to. One of the things that'll be nice is instead of using Turbo Smooth, of course, using Open Sub Div. And Open Sub Div will solve some of those headaches because of these tiny little edges, because you don't need them. You can use the edge weighting to get it to work better. And we're just going to keep going around the mouth now and weighting these up and slowly get them to the point where they have this extra control. So we can even test this theory real quick and just grab for instance, a control in the head. And I'm going to rotate that. And it looks like nothing's happening that you expect. That's again because our Dorito should be hidden. Final head should be open, and now you can see that the Dorito effect is working. We have the ability to start pulling on individual controls and weighting up those individual controls. So now we've got to go through and we've got to weight those all and get them working nicely. You can see where I've got this hard overlap happening because of this double edge. and we need to work that out. So I'm going to go about trying to weight up the mouth around the face here, and getting working a little bit nicer. So as a final product, what we have is the Dorito character head here that's got the skin modifier on it, and is being loaded into Morpher in the final head. And so it's loading into that final Morpher. And so if we drag along, we can see that there's a little bit of animation already on the object here. And if we grab it, we can just start shaping the mouth with these control objects. So these controls can be moved and positioned and shaped to shape the mouth, but of course also we can grab and shape any control that we want to do an overall shape that's driving the main morph targets that we first built. This starts getting us really nice finite control over the mouth. Working on the skinning, of course, is what takes the most sort of work, and making sure that you get nice fluid offsets. So I've been working on that, just trying to make sure I can get nice clean shapes as I distort the mouth. And so there you go, Dorito effect, working on a head in 3ds Max.